What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode on the BDGE Dynasty channel. By now, you guys have already seen a video just like this one. Nick did the running back landing spots and tiering them out based on how he felt those landing spots would be for these rookies in the 2024 NFL Draft. And by the time that you are watching this, we are one day away from the first round of the NFL Draft. So if you have some time tomorrow night, come stop by the BDGE Dynasty channel. Hang out on stream with me, Adam, and Nick. We're going to be streaming the first round of the NFL Draft, so I want to make sure that you guys know that. You can come hang out with us. We're doing some giveaways, a whole bunch of other cool things, so make sure you stop by, like I said, if you have some time. But today, we are going to be doing the wide receiver version of that video you guys watched of Nick's. We're going to be talking about the top landing spots for these rookies. I will be tiering them out, giving you guys some reasonings for why I have them in each of these tiers. And keep in mind, when we are within those tiers, these are not rankings. We're just tiering them based on the actual opportunity. So let's hop right into today's video. But you guys know we can't start it off unless we tuck those shirts in. All right, so we got the tier maker up on the screen. You guys can see it right now. All of these teams are in alphabetical order, so we'll just go through it in alphabetical order. So we're going to start it off with the Arizona Cardinals. Right now, I think they are an S-tier landing spot for a rookie wide receiver. You look at the depth chart that they have right now, Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, Zach Pascal. Not a lot of competition from this wide receiver room. And two of those three guys, Greg Dortch and Zach Pascal, they're going to be free agents in the upcoming season. This is a home run landing spot for a rookie wide receiver. And this team is going to be in the prime spot to be able to land one of those top rookie wide receivers. Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors. I expect them to come away with one of those guys. And even if they don't come away with one of those guys, whoever it may be will have a ton of opportunity right away in this Arizona Cardinals offense, paired with Kyler Murray. So that is going to be very good for their fantasy upside. Now, moving on to the Atlanta Falcons, I do have this team currently as a B tier. They are a team that currently has Drake London, Darnell Mooney, and Rondell Moore in their depth chart. Obviously, they've addressed the quarterback position this offseason. They have signed Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is now the quarterback that they will be moving forward with, and that's great news for Drake London. Obviously, the Darnell Mooney signing is also a signing that is going to add depth to this wide receiver room. And then they also traded for Rondell Moore, which was what they used to get rid of Desmond Ridder. So all in all, this wide receiver room is still a room that has some opportunity because I'm not necessarily the biggest believer in Darnell Mooney. I think he can be a good asset in this offense, but it's not like he is a difference maker. And then Rondell Moore, he is a free agent in just one season. So he may be a plug and fill kind of guy for their slot role, at least for 1 year. But maybe he doesn't get an extension. Maybe the rookie wide receiver comes in and has the ability to compete for that slot job right away. Maybe a guy like Ladd McConkey or somebody in that realm, maybe a Ricky Pearsall, something like that, who can play for a slot wide receiver type of role. I think that would be a good situation for that guy. But right now, I have the Atlanta Falcons as a B tier. Now, moving on to our next team, we are going to be moving on to the Baltimore Ravens. And right now, I have them as an A tier in my tier list. I think this team has a lot of opportunity alongside a guy like Zay Flowers. You look at the depth chart right now, Zay, Rashad Bateman, and Nelson Aguilar, that's kind of what they're rolling with. And even looking at that depth chart, both Bateman and Nelson Aguilar are free agents at the end of the season. So there is going to be a lot of opportunity. Now, obviously, Mark Andrews is still here. Isaiah Likely is still here. I think those guys are still going to be contributors in this offense, but Baltimore has been looking for wide receiver help for a long time. Obviously, they signed Odell Beckham Jr. last year. He has since played a year and now is gone, or at least is still testing the free agent market. So I expect them to want to fill that wide receiver 2 job. And depending on who they bring here in Baltimore, it may even be a guy who profiles better as an X type of wide receiver, who's a little bit better at that than Zay Flowers. So there is going to be a lot of opportunity. Like I said, the vacated targets, the passing attempts were obviously a little bit low in 2023. You guys saw them on the screen. But with that being said, I think that wide receiver 2 job is wide open in Baltimore. And you pair them with Lamar Jackson, he gets a lot of crap, I think, in fantasy football for his inability to pass. This guy's won multiple MVPs. I think you want any player who is attached to a guy that can perform at that level. I think right now they are an A-tier landing spot for a rookie wide receiver. Now, moving on to the Buffalo Bills. This is also an S-tier landing spot for any rookie wide receiver. Right now, the depth chart, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, maybe Mac Hollins is the wide receiver 3. But the big thing, the glaring thing in this offense is 52% of their targets in 2023 have since been vacated. You know that they've moved on from Stephon Diggs. You know they've moved on from Gabe Davis. Diggs obviously now in Houston, Davis in Jacksonville. But this offense is going to be screaming for somebody to come in and be the wide receiver 1. Obviously, 2 of the 3 options that we talked about didn't even play for the Buffalo Bills in 2023. So there is no rapport with Josh Allen. Keep in mind, you also get a rookie paired with Josh Allen. That is going to be everything that you want. I think this is a team that could be looking at day one wide receiver, especially with where they're picking right now. I mean, you get an Adonai Mitchell, a Brian Thomas Jr., somebody like that to go here in Buffalo. People are going to get very excited about it, and I think that they should, because the opportunity is going to be tremendous. Give me any rookie wide receiver here, especially if they get that high-end draft capital, and that's why the Buffalo Bills are an S tier for me in my rankings. Now, moving on to the Carolina Panthers. Right now, I have the Panthers as a B tier landing spot in my rankings. The wide receiver depth chart currently sits as Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, and Jonathan Mingo, most likely as that wide receiver 3. They did get some vacated targets in 2023 from the departure of DJ Shark, Laviska Shenault, a couple other guys as well. And even though it does feel like Carolina has added to this wide receiver room, obviously for the trade of Deontay Johnson, they did sign Adam Thielen to a multiple-year deal, and Jonathan Mingo was drafted in the second round last year. Yeah, it seems like they've been trying to do some help, but there still is a screaming need for wide receiver here in Carolina, especially if they want to further develop Bryce Young under new head coach Dave Canales. And of those guys that we talked about, Deontay Johnson is a free agent next year, so he's going to have to be playing for an extension here in Carolina. And Adam Thielen also has an out in his contract going into next offseason, so there is a chance that they get out of that contract. It doesn't seem like Adam Thielen necessarily wants to be in a rebuild in the later years of his career. So whoever the rookie wide receiver is, or if a rookie wide receiver comes into this situation, they could be in competition for the wide receiver 2 role almost right away. And depending on what happens with Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen long term, maybe they could be the wide receiver 1 for Bryce Young long term. I think there's still a lot to be desired about this landing spot, but with the opportunity baked into it, I think they are a B in my tier list. Now, moving on to the Chicago Bears. Right now, I have them as a C tier. So the first C tier in our tier list today. I think this is a good landing spot for a rookie wide receiver, obviously, but it is very crowded. You think about the rookie quarterback that they're going to be getting, probably Caleb Williams. You look at the passing attempts that they had last year, 513. We expect that to go up under Caleb Williams because quite frankly, he's a better passer than what Justin Fields was last year during the 2023 season. The depth chart right now is DJ Moore. They obviously traded for Keenan Allen, and then Tyler Scott maybe filling that wide receiver 3 job. So there is some questions about that wide receiver 3 role, but I think going into week 1, we all expect it to be DJ Moore, Keenan Allen as the wide receiver 1 and the wide receiver 2. Now, with that being said, it is worth noting that Keenan Allen is going to be going into the final year of his deal, so he is going to be needing a contract extension at the end of this season if they decide to keep him here with the team. And then the year following, DJ Moore is going to be a free agent as well. So multiple wide receiver decisions to be made in this room from a financial standpoint. We have seen them mocked a first-round wide receiver by many different people so far this offseason. I think if they get one of those guys, it is going to feel very JSN-ish, I think, because of what happened last year with the Seattle Seahawks and him. I think it's going to feel the same for the Chicago Bears. And maybe I need to patent that as a term, JSN-ish, I don't know. But that it does feel like that's what's going to happen. So the Chicago Bears, even though it's exciting, Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, all of those things, the opportunity just isn't there. So I think I'm going to have them here in my C tier. Now moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals. This is going to be our first D tier landing spot. And the reason why we have them in this D tier is Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. Obviously, they have chosen to franchise tag T. Higgins here this offseason. He has mentioned in interviews now since he has been franchise tagged that he would like to see himself in Cincinnati long term. So maybe they can come to an extension here. Also, we know that Jamar Chase is going to reset the wide receiver market shortly after Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb both reset the market themselves. But the reason why we haven't put them in the F tier is because we have seen 3 wide receivers be relevant in this offense before. Obviously, Tyler Boyd had been a big part of this offense for a long time. He is an unrestricted free agent right now. He is not currently on the roster, so there is room for a guy to come in and kind of fill that Tyler Boyd role. There obviously is 17% vacated targets, 615 passing attempts. There is some opportunity, but it does feel like the ceiling of whatever rookie wide receiver comes in is going to be capped pretty heavily by both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, so that is why this is going to be a D tier landing spot. Now moving on to the Dallas Cowboys, we are going to put them in the B tier. They had 10% of the vacated targets this year, and all of those are coming from Michael Gallup, who is currently an unrestricted free agent. So the depth chart right now is CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, and Jalen Tolbert. They obviously passed the football a lot last year, and like I mentioned with Gallup, a unrestricted free agent right now, Brandon Cooks will be following shortly next year. So there is only one more year of Brandon Cooks before he is going to need a new contract. So my assumption is that Dallas will be looking for their long-term wide receiver 2 to pair next to CeeDee Lamb. most likely a rookie on a rookie contract that isn't going to cost them a lot because they're going to have to pay CeeDee Lamb a lot. He's probably going to get a bag. I also expect the Dallas Cowboys to come to an extension with Dak Prescott. He is going to be an unrestricted free agent next year, so that is worth monitoring. But I do think they come to an extension. So it will be CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, and whoever this wide receiver 2 is long term. And I think that is still enough opportunity and enough to be excited about that we should be valuing this as a B tier. And it maybe could even be in the argument for an A tier type of landing spot. Now, moving on to the Denver Broncos, I'm going to put them in the C tier here with Chicago. And really the reasoning is because even though the depth chart isn't fantastic here in Denver, it's obviously Courtland Sutton, Marvin Mims, and Josh Reynolds, who is signed as a free agent. The big news is they traded away Jerry Jeudy. He is on the Cleveland Browns now. So if you missed that news, that's where he's at. But there has been some vacated targets in this offense. The only issue is we don't know who the long-term quarterback solution is going to be here in Denver. Obviously, there is a chance that they get a J.J. McCarthy, maybe a Bo Nix, a Michael Penix, something like that. We've heard rumors of them wanting to move up in this year's draft. But right now, it doesn't look like they are going to be projected to get one of those guys unless they are moving up in the NFL draft. I think that makes this landing spot a little bit less desirable. But with that being said, this landing spot could improve pretty drastically if a rookie quarterback goes there, because right now the only wide receiver on this team that is under contract for longer than 2 years is Marvin Mims. Courtland Sutton only has 2 years left in his deal, and then he is a free agent. And with the way that the rumors have been going with Courtland Sutton, I really wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't finish out that contract here in Denver, especially because they're eating a lot of cap space from Russell Wilson. But right now, as it sits, I do think that this is a landing spot where they're probably going to be in the C tier just due to lack of quarterback certainty. Now let's move on to the Detroit Lions. I currently have them in the B tier here with Dallas. And the same reasoning kind of with CeeDee Lamb is the same reasoning that you could use with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's been a stud for this Lions offense. He is going to earn a massive extension, a free agent next offseason that is going to stay in Detroit most likely. I can't imagine the Detroit Lions don't pay him accordingly to stay here. But there are some question marks about the wide receiver 2 role in this offense, so that does open up some opportunity for a rookie wide receiver. Obviously, they have been looking for that wide receiver 2 for a while now. They tried with Jameson Williams, and so far, I don't think that the Lions are very happy with what they've gotten out of Jameson Williams to this point. Depending on where they draft a rookie wide receiver, he could come in and compete with Jameson Williams right away. And Jameson Williams only has a couple years left on his contract. Within 2 years, he's going to need an extension. And at that point, the Detroit Lions will have to make a decision on whether they want him back or if they want to move forward with a new guy. I think if you bring a rookie in right now, you're almost saying that you don't want to move forward with Jameson Williams unless he takes a step forward. So I do think that there is a good opportunity for a rookie to come in and seize that wide receiver 2 role. Also, they threw the football a lot, 600 plus passing attempts last year. That's obviously beneficial for a rookie wide receiver as well. Very happy to keep them here in this B tier. And just like I mentioned with Dallas, because of that, obviously the wide receiver 1 job is probably not going to be something that a rookie can come in and grab, especially because of how talented Amon-Ra and even a CeeDee Lamb have been in those 2 situations. But this is a job where you can come in and be the wide receiver 2 pretty much instantly. So I'm comfortable keeping them here in this B tier. Now let's go to the Green Bay Packers. This is a team that I'm going to put in my D tier. And the reasoning why is you look at the depth chart with Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, even Dontavion Wicks, Bo Melton, a bunch of other guys here in this wide receiver room. They've done a fantastic job of drafting rookies over the last couple of seasons, and they built a pretty talented wide receiver room. Now, you look at this offseason, they have lost 0% of their targets. So because of that, there's really no room for a rookie to come in and find opportunity right away because none has been given up. This is a very talented offense, a very talented room, a very crowded room. I wouldn't be very excited about any rookie that comes into this situation because they'd have to beat out a lot of guys in order to be relevant. Now that takes us to the Houston Texans, and we are going to have our first F-tier landing spot. I think the Texans are an F tier because obviously we look at what they have done this offseason. Trading for Stephon Diggs tells us that they are ready to make a run at a Super Bowl. This is going to be a very competitive team, a team that is looking to contend right away. And yes, they have a wide receiver room of Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. They lost 0%. There was no vacated targets in 2023. And then you add a target monster in Stephon Diggs. It's going to get pretty crowded here. Any rookie wide receiver that goes to this situation is probably not going to play a lot early on. And yes, there may be a little bit of a glimmer of hope because you look at the contracts of this team, they did wipe the final years out of Stephon Diggs' deal, so he is going to be a free agent in 2025. And so is Nico Collins. Nico Collins is going to be a free agent in 2025 as well. But I think depending on how this year goes, you could see both of these guys get a contract extension to stay in Houston. And if not, one of these guys will, and it'll still be a pretty crowded wide receiver room. So I don't expect them to invest in wide receiver heavy in the draft. So that means you're likely not going to be getting a difference maker type of wide receiver. So for me, the opportunity is just not there, and it's gotten so crowded. And I think it goes without saying, obviously you want a guy paired to CJ Stroud, but you also need a guy who has opportunity. There just is no opportunity here in Houston. So they are going to be our first F tier landing spot. Now, moving on to the Indianapolis Colts, here's where we're going to put them in the C tier. Currently, a depth chart of Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, and Alec Pierce. We do like that depth chart. We do like what we saw out of Josh Downs. Obviously, Michael Pittman Jr. saw an extension, but I do think that there is room for a guy to come in and kind of take Alec Pierce's job. He hasn't been great. He hasn't been bad, I think, in his time in Indianapolis, but they could use a better wide receiver and upgrade to Alec Pierce to put alongside Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs for the future of Anthony Richardson. I think those things considered, this is probably a middle of the pack landing spot. I lean more towards the lower end because I do believe that Michael Pittman Jr. is paid to be the alpha in this offense long term, but right now they're going to be sitting in our C tier. Now, moving on to the Jacksonville Jaguars, I am going to put them up in the A tier with the Baltimore Ravens. Right now, a depth chart of Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, and Zay Jones. 28% of their targets were vacated in 2023. Obviously, a lot of those being with Calvin Ridley. They had 620 passing attempts. That was up towards the top of the NFL. A rookie wide receiver would benefit tremendously from coming into this situation. And I know you look at it and you say, hey, Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis, they are no chumps. They are still good wide receivers. They could be a little bit of competition for a rookie wide receiver. And some people are going to have some negative things to say about Trevor Lawrence. But at the end of the day, you want to add a rookie to this situation because, yes, at the end of the day, they add Gabe Davis, but really, he's not that big of a difference maker. Zay Jones is going to be going into a contract year this season, followed by Christian Kirk the year after. And Christian Kirk will be 30 years old at that point. So will they really give Christian Kirk a lot of money to stay as the wide receiver in this offense? I'm not really sure. Now, obviously, the Jags don't have like high-end draft capital to go get a big wide receiver, but this is a deep wide receiver class. You add a guy in there, he could at least compete for the wide receiver 3 job this year, maybe even work his way into the wide receiver 2 as the years go on. I think this is a very solid landing spot for a rookie wide receiver, and I think it's sneaky too. Not a lot of people are thinking about this spot for rookie wide receivers. Now that takes us to the Kansas City Chiefs, and most people would put this in the S tier. I'm going to put them in the A tier. I'll hear the argument for the S tier, but you look at this wide receiver room right now, Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Justin Watson, probably their guys, their wide receiver 3. I don't think anybody thinks it's going to be Kadarius Toney. He hasn't been any good. Sky Moore hasn't been any good. But ultimately, what you're buying here is the Patrick Mahomes effect. You want the wide receiver attached to Patrick Mahomes, and if they go first round wide receiver, I think there's an argument that that player could be more considered an S tier type of guy. They obviously need an alpha. There is some uncertainty with Rashee Rice's availability in 2024, but ultimately, I do think he's going to be okay. Hollywood Brown, he's on a 1-year deal. He's probably going to have to prove it to get an extension, but this is a landing spot where if I was going to rank them within this tier, they probably are the number 1 landing spot in the A tier, maybe even in consideration for the S tier, like I said. But I just think that there are some landing spots with clear pathways to day 1 targets than the rookie wide receiver would get here in Kansas City with Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown. Now that's going to take us to the Las Vegas Raiders. I currently have them in my C tier. Right now, the depth chart, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, they've moved on from Hunter Renfrow this offseason, but he wasn't really a big contributor for them in 2023 anyways, only about 8% of the targets being vacated from this offense. So I do think that this Raiders team is likely going to be in the middle of a rebuild here very soon. Jacoby Myers, he is going to be an unrestricted free agent here at the end of this season. And Devontae Adams will be 32 years old with a potential out in his contract. Whether they choose to keep paying him if they are in a rebuild at his age and his current needs as a player in the last half of his career, I'm not necessarily sure all of those things add up. So yes, there's a chance that they could go in and get a guy in this year's class that could compete for touches, but it likely won't come until after this season or maybe even beyond that, depending on what happens with Devontae Adams. Because as long as Devontae Adams is in silver and black, he is going to be the wide receiver 1 until those wheels fall off. So I do think that this landing spot, based on the quarterback uncertainty and likely a jumbled wide receiver room with Adams and Myers for the next year or so, this is probably a spot that falls into that C tier for me. And now that takes us to the Los Angeles Chargers. This is a team that is for sure in that S tier for me. You look at the depth chart, Quentin Johnston, Josh Palmer, Darius Davis, there's nobody there in this wide receiver room that is worth a damn. Now, obviously, Quentin Johnson, he was added as a first-round wide receiver last year. He is going to have to step up here in year 2. He hasn't proven anything up to this point, but 40% of their targets in 2023 have walked out the door. 632 passing attempts, obviously, last year as well. Very, very high. That number is probably going to come down under Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman with this new look offense. They do want to run the ball, but even if that comes down a little bit, there is so much opportunity for a rookie to come in and seize day one. You see that they've moved on from Keenan Allen. You see they move on from Mike Evans. There's just so much opportunity here. And you also get to pair the guy with Justin Herbert long term, which is going to be ideal. They're also a team that is going to be in prime position to draft a Marvin Harrison, a Malik Neighbors, maybe even a Romo Dunze if they move back. Somebody's going to go here to be a difference maker, and they will almost instantly be the wide receiver 1 in this offense. I think there's a lot to like here, and even if you think, hey, Josh Palmer's been somewhat fantasy relevant, he's also a free agent next year, so it doesn't really matter if he is going to be here long term because his contract's about to end. So lots of opportunity here in Los Angeles. I think this is an S-tier landing spot for a rookie. And now we have the Los Angeles Rams. I am going to put them in the D tier right now. Obviously, a depth chart filled with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Tutel Atwell. He kind of showed off a little bit last year at times. Only 1% of the targets have been vacated here. Both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are under contract, locked in until 2027. So that is a long time to wait on somebody to come in and at least get chances at a wide receiver 2 job. I think you'd be more likely to make the bet that Cooper Kupp is washed and he's likely going to see retirement before he sees the end of this contract. It's not necessarily the bet that I want to make. It just seems like this is a landing spot where at best, you're going to get a guy who can be the wide receiver 3 alongside those two guys. I don't think that that's a very high ceiling and not likely a bet that I want to make on my teams. So I am going to put them in the D tier. They're almost the F tier, but because the chance that you can be a wide receiver 3, I think you don't have a chance of being a wide receiver 3 in Houston. So we'll keep the Rams here in the D tier. And now moving on to the Miami Dolphins, we're actually going to stick in that D tier. Another offense that is full of weapons, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. They re-signed Braxton Berrios to play that slot. There's just not a lot of opportunity here. I mean, you look at that duo of Waddle and Hill in contention for one of the best wide receiver duos in the NFL. Hill's under contract until 2027. Jalen Waddle likely to get a contract extension here in 2026. There's just not a major need for a wide receiver in this offense. And like I said with the Los Angeles Rams, if you are going to be drafting a rookie wide receiver here, you are drafting at best the wide receiver 3 in this offense. I don't really want that for fantasy football, so they are going to be a D tier landing spot for me here. And now moving on to the Minnesota Vikings, let's just keep this D tier train rolling. Same situation, man. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. This wide receiver room is very crowded, and quite honestly, this is probably a bottom 5 landing spot for a rookie wide receiver, and that doesn't even account for the fact that Kirk Cousins is out the door. They are likely going to be looking for a rookie quarterback if they can get one. If they can't get one, you're looking at Sam Darnold as the quarterback for at least the next year or so here in Minnesota. Now, obviously, the passing attempts are high, 631. That is a lot of passing attempts, but that is going to have to come down to help a rookie quarterback develop, to help Sam Darnold if he is the quarterback. I don't expect those passing attempts to be that high in 2024. And even if they are, like I said, there's not a lot of opportunity outside of those 3 guys that we mentioned, Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson. I just don't think this is a good landing spot for a rookie wide receiver. Now that takes us to the New England Patriots, and I'm actually going to put the Patriots in this B tier right here. And hear me out, because I know you think about the Patriots situation and everybody says, I don't really want a wide receiver to go there. And I hear you. Right now, the wide receiver depth chart of Juju Smith-Schuster, Demario Douglas, KJ Osborne coming over as a free agent, there really is not a lot to be excited about. And obviously, there are some long-term question marks about the quarterback. Now, assuming that they sit and pick at number 3, they get a Drake May, a Jaden Daniels, a JJ McCarthy, whoever it may be, there is really no argument that whoever the wide receiver is that comes in will have the ability to compete for the wide receiver 1 role right away. Right now, there is nobody in this offense who really has the lead on that wide receiver 1 job. I guess Demario Douglas would most likely be the likely candidate for that, but KJ Osborne could very well be the number 1 too, the guy that they signed to come in this offseason and be that guy for him. The reality is there's nobody here that is worth a damn, so any rookie that they pick is going to have opportunity day 1. And if you can be the wide receiver 1 in your offense, even if the offense is bad, we've seen that be beneficial for fantasy football purposes before. It takes a lot of targets, but the rookie could receive that here in New England, so it's It's not going to be an A tier, not going to be an S tier because of those quarterback concerns, but definitely should be in consideration for the B tier just because of the amount of opportunity a rookie should see right away. Now that takes us to the New Orleans Saints, and I'm going to put the Saints right now in this B tier as well. Right now, a depth chart of Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, A.T. Perry. 17% of their targets are vacated this year, 600 plus passing attempts in 2023. Rashid Shaheed, he comes back on a one-year deal, but he's going to be due for an extension again next offseason. The big elephant in the room, Michael Thomas, an unrestricted free agent. It looks like he is going to be out the door, likely not receiving an extension to stay here in New Orleans. So they are going to be looking for a wide receiver to be the wide receiver 2 alongside Olave long term. Maybe it's Shaheed. It depends on the wide receiver that they draft, but there is going to be opportunity for a guy to come in and compete for that wide receiver 2 job right away. And obviously there's some question marks about the quarterback as well. Is Derek Carr going to be the guy long term? Probably not, but he is going to be serviceable for your wide receivers in fantasy football, at least for now. So I do think that the Saints deserve to be in this B tier because that wide receiver 2 job can be up for the taking almost immediately. And now going to the New York Giants, we are going to stay in that B tier. And this argument is kind of a similar argument to the argument we make with the New England Patriots. On the surface, the landing spot, it seems scary. It seems gross. A lot of people aren't excited about it. The depth chart right now, Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton. Now, they didn't pass the football that much in 2023. 518 passing attempts, 11% of their targets are vacated, most of those being in Sterling Shepard. And it's been a long time since a wide receiver has come in and been fantasy relevant. Probably the last time was Odell Beckham Jr. when Eli Manning was the quarterback. Now, like we mentioned with the Patriots, it's ugly. It's probably going to be a slow burn because the guy at the quarterback position right now is probably not their guy long term. Maybe he can surprise us, but it's going to have to take a massive step forward. But whatever wide receiver comes into this role is going to be able to be or at least compete for that number 1 job right away. I think the opportunity still has to have some of the weight, even though the landing spot isn't going to be elevating that wide receiver at the moment. But all it's going to take is a step forward from Daniel Jones or even a small upgrade from a quarterback. And then all of a sudden that wide receiver could break out for fantasy football. I think the opportunity means more for me than the landing spot right away. And that's why the New York Giants are probably going to be a B for me in this tier. Now moving on to the New York Jets, I am going to put them in the C tier here. You look at the depth chart, Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams coming over as a free agent, Alan Lazard. Not a lot of opportunity left in 2023, just 3% of vacated targets, but they still passed the football 600 plus times without Aaron Rodgers being under center. Now, obviously, the Jets have been looking for a wide receiver 2 for a long time now. They tried it in Elijah Moore. It didn't really pan out, so they signed Mike Williams. It's just a one-year deal, so this could be a short-term fix. It's also worth noting that he's coming off of an ACL tear, so there could be a lot of risk in his wide receiver 2 role in this offense. And even though we expect Garrett Wilson to get a massive extension in a couple of years, I think that there are some long-term question marks about the quarterback because Aaron Rodgers is quite old at this point, and he is coming off of an Achilles tear, so yeah, this is a landing spot where maybe a guy could come in and be the wide receiver 2 in a year or so. But even with that being said, who's going to be the quarterback? It's hard to tell. So I think right now I am going to put them in the C tier. There just isn't a lot of opportunity and there isn't a lot of upside, I think, to be in this offense long term. Now moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles, we are going to put them in the D tier here with the Vikings. And you can almost echo everything that I said about the Vikings and make those as the same points about the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, they have a very talented wide receiver room with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. A.J. Brown is under contract until 2027, and Devontae Smith just received an extension a year early, so they're going to be locked into those 2 wide receivers for a long time. They added Devontae Parker this offseason. He's not necessarily a difference maker and not necessarily a guy that I'm going to be too scared of. The passing attempts were kind of middle of the pack, but this is a room where if they get a rookie wide receiver, they're probably just competing to be the wide receiver 3. And we've seen the wide receiver 3 in this offense not really be fantasy relevant for a long time. Quez Watkins, Julio Jones, not really been a lot of good players, but also there just hasn't been a lot of opportunity for those guys either. So that's going to make this a D tier landing spot as well. So moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, I am going to make this an A tier landing spot. And their depth chart right now has George Pickens and then Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin. Really a bunch of ambiguity here from the wide receiver 2 down. I think you look at this offense, 19% of the vacated opportunities being gone in Deontay Johnson. Obviously, the passing attempts weren't very high last year, 506 passing attempts, but they do get potentially a quarterback upgrade here in Russell Wilson. If not Russell Wilson, they will move on to Justin Fields, who hopefully is a quarterback upgrade at that point. So George Pickens is the wide receiver 1 today. He does have 2 years left in his contract, but after that point, it is hard to tell because the Steelers, they cycle through these wide receivers, man. We've seen them go through these wide receivers year after year after year, and the reality is they don't like to pay those big extensions after a guy's contract has come up. So there really is no certainty that George Pickens does get that massive contract from them. If they get a rookie wide receiver in here, he could very well be the wide receiver one of this offense in a matter of 2 years. That's just something that could happen. It makes him very enticing for me, and we also know the track record of the Pittsburgh Steelers when it comes to hitting on wide receivers. This is an A-tier landing spot. Now, moving on to the San Francisco 49ers, I am also going to put them in the D tier. Currently a depth chart of Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and Chris Conley most likely as that wide receiver 3. They lost about 10% of their targets in 2023, but this is a team that had a league low in passing attempts, 491. Not that many passing attempts from this offense, and I'm going to operate under the assumption that Brandon Ayuk and the San Francisco 49ers find middle ground. They come to some sort of an extension because there is a lot of Brandon Ayuk rumors in the air right now, and I'm recording this on Sunday night. Maybe by Wednesday when you guys see this, that has totally changed. I guess it could have changed up to that point, but I'm going with the assumption that Brandon Ayuk is still there, so keep that with a grain of salt. But also you look at the options outside of Brandon Ayuk in this offense, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. There's a lot of people. It's a very crowded offense, and there's probably not going to be a lot of room for a rookie to come in and be an impact player for our fantasy football teams. So that is going to make them a D-tier landing spot for me. At best, they're likely the wide receiver 3 on this offense. Now moving on to the Seattle Seahawks, another F-tier landing spot for me. And we thought last year it was going to be hard for Jackson Smith-Njigba to come in and compete with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Well, they re-upped Tyler Lockett. DK Metcalf's still there. Now JSN is there. Imagine another rookie wide receiver having to come in and compete with not only the 2 guys that we were worried about for JSN, also JSN included. It just makes this landing spot very, very difficult for me to be excited about a rookie wide receiver. The opportunity for them is going to be virtually nothing. And then also there's going to be long-term quarterback question marks about Geno Smith. Is it going to be him? Could potentially Sam Howell step in and be the guy? Who knows? Are you excited about either of those guys? I'm probably not. It just seems like they have no business investing in a rookie wide receiver. And even if they do, there's really not going to be a lot of opportunity for them. So they are also going to land in that F tier with the Houston Texans. Now moving on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I am going to put them here in the C tier. And right now, the depth chart of Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Trey Palmer, only 5% of their targets have been vacated this year, 568 passing attempts. Mike Evans obviously got his extension to stay in Tampa Bay, as well as Baker Mayfield. But you look at this depth chart, and Chris Godwin, he is coming off of a little bit of a down year. He's going to be entering the final year of his contract here this season. So maybe there's room for a guy after a Chris Godwin departure, potentially in 2025. So there is chance for a guy to come in and at least find a role as the wide receiver 3, despite how much you might believe in Trey Palmer, and then eventually be the wide receiver 2 alongside Mike Evans long term. It's going to take a little bit more time. There's a couple more steps involved, and they are going to be tied to Baker Mayfield, which historically hasn't been fantastic. But there's still at least a pathway for valuable reps, so I am going to put them here in this C tier. And the Tennessee Titans, I am going to put them in the C tier as well. You look at this depth chart, Calvin Ridley obviously being signed and brought over this offseason. DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks, those are kind of the guys here. Another team that was very low in the passing attempts department last year, 494. Will Levis, obviously the quarterback, new head coach Brian Callahan coming from Cincinnati now to coach this offense. So it is going to be a little bit of a new look, but it does feel a little bit more crowded, at least right now. The reality is the Titans haven't gotten what they've wanted out of Treylon Burks ever since they traded A.J. Brown to draft Treylon in the first round. It just hasn't worked out for them. And also DeAndre Hopkins, he is only on a 1-year deal, so he holds the wide receiver 2 job right now, but long term that is still going to be in question. Really, the only guy of importance to be here long-term is going to be Calvin Ridley. So there is going to be room for a rookie wide receiver to come in and potentially find his way into that wide receiver 2 job in 2025 and beyond. But like I mentioned with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it just may take a year or 2 for those things to fall into place. So still a pathway, just might take a little bit more time. But the passing attempts probably make it a little bit of a worse landing spot than even Tampa Bay's is. Still going to keep them here in the C tier, but ultimately that's where the Tennessee Titans land. Now, our second to last team is going to be the Washington Commanders. I am going to put them in the B tier right here with the New York Giants. And right now their depth chart, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, De'Ami Brown maybe is the wide receiver 3. At least that's kind of what they've drafted him to be. It turned out to be Curtis Samuel. He's no longer there. 19% of their targets being vacated and 636 passing attempts in 2023. And the crazy thing is that almost every single wide receiver in this offense is expected to be a free agent at some point over the next 2 seasons. Jahan Dotson, he was a major disappointment in 2023. Terry McLaurin, he's going to be 30 years old when it's time for him to get his next deal. I think the Commanders could potentially be a team that is in the market for a rookie wide receiver, and this is probably a sneakier wide receiver landing spot as well. You also have to assume that under Cliff Kingsbury, the guy who is famous for the air raid offense, they're probably going to want to throw the football just as much as they have before. Rookie quarterback coming into this offense as well. This might be a decent spot for a rookie wide receiver, but I am going to keep them here in this B tier. And the last and final team we're going to talk about is the Cleveland Browns. And if you're looking at this logo and you say that this logo is a weird logo, is that really the Browns logo? I had to ask myself. You guys know Adam, he's the Browns fan. I had to ask him, I said, is this a logo that the Browns use? Apparently it is. He says it's the worst logo. So because of that, Adam, you're welcome. I had to use it in this video. The worst Browns logo of all time. But right now, their depth chart, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore. The big news, obviously, is they have traded for Jerry Jeudy this offseason after last offseason trading for Elijah Moore. So they've been looking for that wide receiver 2 in the offense. They've made multiple trades over multiple offseasons now to try and find that guy. Now they have a wide receiver room of these 3 guys, and it honestly feels pretty good. The passing attempts that they had last year were also very high as well, 624. And you might be looking at it and saying, hey, Andrew, they have 3 good wide receivers. Why would you want a rookie wide receiver here? And the reality of it is, the reason why they're sitting in the C tier is because both Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore are free agents at the end of this season. Is there possibly going to be an opportunity for a rookie wide receiver to come in and take Elijah Moore's job, maybe even be the successor to a guy like Amari Cooper? Potentially, it's going to depend on how this year goes. I could even hear the argument that this is a D tier landing spot, but the amount of passing attempts that they had in 2023 and the potential free agents that they have here in the upcoming season, there is a little bit of a path for a rookie wide receiver, but C tier, D tier, you guys can tell me what you think. I'm going to lean towards like the back end of the C tier, but ultimately that's where they're going to land, and that is going to be the last team in this tier list. So there you guys have it. 32 teams, 32 landing spots, all ranked and tiered for you for Dynasty Fantasy Football purposes for this 2024 rookie class. If you guys did enjoy the video, go ahead and hit that like button. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. And more importantly, come hang out with us on our first round NFL draft stream tomorrow night. Come get some giveaways. Just hang out with the boys. I promise it's going to be a very fun time. You guys won't regret spending your evening with us. Instant analysis on everything you need to know about these fantasy football prospects and a whole lot more. Some crazy stuff that will happen. We got a wheel of like a whole bunch of challenges, a whole bunch of other stuff. I can't explain it. You guys got to be there to see it. But with that out of the way, do all the YouTube stuff, subscribe, blah, 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 blah. See you on the next one. Hopefully see you tomorrow. Peace out.